Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the debrief for the 2019 Japanese Grand Prix. And it's a debrief that will be a little bit different than normal because a fair bit happened post-race that I really do need to cover. As ever though, I'll start by going over the race result, which has changes since yesterday and could yet change again, but more on that later. Valtteri Bottas took victory in the 52-lap race, with Sebastian Vettel just over 13 seconds further back and Lewis Hamilton third, who got fastest lap by the way, and with that 1-3 and the fastest lap bonus point, Mercedes sealed their 6th consecutive Constructors' Championship. Alexander Albon was fourth with a really good drive, picking up the pieces once again after Verstappen's DNF. It's also his best result in F1, so massive congratulations for him, but his race wasn't without incident. He went for a late move up the inside of Norris at the final chicane, made contact and put the Brit off the track, a move the stewards noted but took no action over. Surprisingly, in my view, I thought they'd give him a penalty, but obviously decided not to. Carlos Sainz was once again brilliant in 5th place for McLaren, with Daniel Ricciardo promoted to 6th after Leclerc was penalised and dropped to 7th. I will obviously talk about that shortly, but also Ricciardo's position isn't safe and neither is teammate Nico Hülkenberg's in 10th, but again, more on that in a few. Pierre Gasly is in 8th place. He made contact with Perez, which put the Mexican into the wall. It was an incident that the stewards once again looked at. They did investigate it this time, but they felt the drivers both played a part in it and decided not to take any further action. And having watched it again today, I think it's a fair call. I understand why Checo is a bit miffed, but he does turn in and Pierre can't just disappear. And equally, Gasly could have kept it a bit tighter, which I guess is why the stewards decided to call it a racing incident. They couldn't put the blame at one driver's door. The incident with Gasly left Perez out of the race. However, because the, let's say, digital checkered flag was shown on timing screens in a software glitch, the result of the race had to be taken from lap 52 rather than lap 53 when the actual physical flag was flown. So a lucky escape there for Checo, but the FIA, by the way, have launched an investigation into why the error occurred. Lance Stroll, he finished 11th for Racing Point with Daniel Kvyat in 12th. Lando Norris, he came home in 13th. As already covered, he was shoved off the road by Albon. But Lando post-race didn't have an issue with it, saying that Albon made a decent move and described it as, quote, fair play. It was a rough old race for Lando though. He had to make a pit stop early on due to debris getting caught in his brakes. He also said post-race that he was struggling with his tyres late on, which is why his pace dropped off. Now, I said this in yesterday's race reaction. I don't remember seeing much, if anything at all, of any of the Alpha or Haas drivers. Kimi Raikkonen was 14th with Gio in 16th. And to give you an idea as to how eventful their race was, the team only tweeted twice with updates. And they usually tweet a lot more than that, giving you lap by lap updates. So a little bit dull for them perhaps. And as for Haas, Grosjean was 15th and K-Mag 17th, with Magnussen saying that his quali crash was what ultimately led to his race being disappointing. And Grosjean, who apparently did make a couple of good overtakes in the race around the outside of Russell and another on Giovinazzi, says his race was pretty much after that all about tyre management. Sounds absolutely thrilling, Roman. And then, of course, it's the Williams boys, Russell in 18th, Kubica 19th. George said that he had some brake issues, which made his race more difficult. And Kubica somehow made it to the race. He crashed out in qualifying and the team managed to rebuild the car in just a few hours. So huge credit to them for that. However, the pole wasn't happy with what he described as a difficult race, but after quali he was even more unhappy as he expected to be running the new spec front wing, but the team had decided not to put it on either car, with Williams later saying that they never had any intention of running it. So there have been a few words said in front of the cameras and I'd imagine behind the scenes as well, and that relationship is starting to get a little bit strained. Technically, your retirements list should be Perez and Verstappen, but because of the checkered flag issue, it's officially just Max Verstappen. And just very quickly to confirm, when the official result was issued post-Leclerc penalty, Russell was classified despite, for whatever reason, the initial results showing that he retired from the race. What a weird weekend. Let's have a quick look at how that leaves the championship standings, starting with the top 10 in the drivers. All of that means that Valtteri Bottas has actually closed the gap on teammate Lewis Hamilton to 64 points, but it is now mathematically just between those two, although, let's be honest, it's still Hamilton's to lose, isn't it? Charles Leclerc remains third with 221 points now. Max Verstappen fourth on 212, tied with Sebastian Vettel in fifth, who also has 212 points, which is an obvious statement to make because that's what tied means, Sean. But anyway, carry on. Carlos Sainz jumps up into 6th place, 76 points, and if you're interested, that is only 1 point less than both Renault drivers combined. That's Renault, the manufacturer that supply McLaren with power units. Ouch. Pierre Gasly is now 7th on 73 points with Alex Albon closing in on 64. And then it's Daniel Ricciardo on 42 in 9th and Nico Hülkenberg on 35 in 10th. But although it's not on screen now, Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, Daniel Kvyat and Kimi Raikkonen are all within striking distance of 10th place. In fact, Raikkonen in 14th is just 4 points off Hülkenberg. As I've already said, with that 1-3 finish in the fastest lap bonus point, Mercedes have now been confirmed as Constructors' Champions, and also with the Drivers' Championship now confirmed as going to one of their drivers, it also means that they make history and become the first team to ever win 6 straight double championships. Ferrari are second on 433 with Red Bull third on 323. I think that's pretty much done as well between those two. McLaren fourth on 111 points. Renault are 5th on 77, for now of course, with Toro Rosso 6th on 59, Racing Point 7th on 54, Alfa Romeo in 8th on 35, Haas have got 28 points in 9th, and Williams still prop up the table 10th place with 1 point. On to some talking points then, and I have to start with Mercedes and Valtteri Bottas. It was a really strong drive from Bottas who, to be honest, despite not leading every lap of the race due to pit stops and whatnot, he always looked in control of that win for me. I mean, there was some initial confusion over Merck's strategy from a viewer's perspective anyway. After he pitted, the team told Bottas that he would be pitting again, but teammate Lewis Hamilton would only be pitting once. That meant the Finn had to push to close that gap, and it looked as though he may well have to overtake Lewis on the track if he wanted the win. And that's the point I'm making. The pace he demonstrated after that stop still made him look like the favourite for the win in my view. But as it all turned out, it was all a bit academic in the end, because they did decide to pit Lewis for a second time, and it was a call which Hamilton wasn't totally happy about over team radio. I think mainly because the gap after his first stop to the top two was a lot bigger than I think he expected. Although he did question why he wasn't put on the hards after his first stop if there were, in the team's view, concerns over degradation, but was told that the reason was basically he'd not run the hards all weekend and so they were untested. Hamilton did close Vettel down towards the end and got close to taking second, but time eventually ran out, obviously, and he had to settle for third place. That Ferrari was again rapid down the straights, and that just made Hamilton's task even tougher. I will say though, even though Ferrari had that straight line advantage, I still expected the Merc on the fresher soft tyres to catch him and pretty much breeze past him with better traction to take that second place. I'm not going to lie though, it was very much all about strategy at the front, well, after the first couple of laps anyway, and we didn't see much wheel-to-wheel racing. Another one of those races full of strategy intrigue. A quick word on that championship victory for Mercedes as well. It's just absolutely phenomenal and once again highlights how efficiently that team works together. I said this last season, I'm going to say it again now. It just goes to show what a team can achieve if everybody is pulling in the right direction. Despite how dominant they were back in 2014, I never believed that they would go on a run like this, and I'd be willing to bet that they never believed it. And to take 6 drivers' titles along the way as well, that's 12 titles in 6 seasons, is just incredible. They get a lot of stick for, in some people's eyes, ruining the sport, but I don't see that at all. They deserve so much more credit, and you know, perhaps it's time Ferrari and Red Bull pulled their fingers out and challenged Mercedes over a whole season. Honestly, huge congratulations to the Silver Arrows, and I know it's early, but I suppose the question now is, can they make it 7 next year? And that would be a record-breaking 7 as well. Right then, let's get on to the more controversial moments of the race, starting at the start. Both Ferraris were caught out at the start, with Bottas streaming past both of them into the lead, and Max Verstappen managing to get alongside Charles Leclerc for what would have been 3rd place. He did keep his Red Bull on the outside of turn 1 and tried to keep it there through turn 2, but Leclerc understeered into Max, putting the Red Bull into a spin and causing damage, which would eventually see the Dutchman retire from the race. Now, the stewards noted the incident and initially chose to take no further action. A few laps later though, after quote, new evidence became available, they decided they would investigate the collision after all. Yet, despite the incident taking place at the second corner of lap 1, a decision wasn't reached until after the race. So eventually it was decided that Leclerc was in the wrong and he was handed a 5-second time penalty, a decision I pretty much completely agree with. I mean, I do feel, I guess, a little bit for Charles in a way, because he did lose the front end as he was close to the back of another car and it just caused him to understeer into Verstappen. But ultimately, Max did absolutely nothing wrong. He left plenty of space and was just ahead as well. Leclerc understeering into Verstappen also resulted in his race coming to an end. So in that situation, Verstappen's come off a hell of a lot worse. The understeer, by the way, was something the stewards accepted and agreed that perhaps it wasn't his fault, but they felt that Charles should have, quote, anticipated and allowed for it. They also added that none of the normal mitigating circumstances existed, as it was an unusual first lap incident. That wasn't all though. As a result of the contact, Leclerc's front wing was damaged, and it was clear to probably just about everybody watching that race that he needed to pit as the end plate was hanging off, and therefore his car was quite clearly in an unsafe condition. The end plate eventually flicked off, flew through the air and sliced Lewis Hamilton's wing mirror off. Now before I go any further, and yes I know we have the halo, but just imagine for 1 second that halo doesn't deflect that piece of debris. What could have happened if that hit Hamilton rather than the mirror? It just doesn't bear thinking about. Very dangerous, but anyway, after the race, the stewards took a look at the whole thing and decided to slap Leclerc with a 10-second time penalty, taking his total to 15 seconds and dropping him to 7th in the results for continuing to drive the car in an unsafe condition. Ferrari were also fined €25,000 for leaving the car out in an unsafe condition, despite telling race control that they would pit Leclerc at the end of lap 2, instead calling him in at the end of lap 3 after the race director stepped in and issued an instruction. In the description, there is a link to a racefans.net article that has got the team radio transcript discussing what to do. If you want a clear picture of what happened from that point of view, it is well worth a read. There is a bit of debate online about whether or not a 10-second penalty was enough for leaving an unsafe car on track, and in McLaren's words, putting everyone at risk. What I will say is it was stupid, that's for sure, especially when you consider that by telling race control they will pit Leclerc, Ferrari are effectively admitting the car is unsafe, and so by leaving him out for another lap, they've knowingly left an unsafe car on track. I mean, 25k is a lot of money to you and me, but to Ferrari it's not really all that much, though it is one of the heftier fines we've seen for a while. But what else could the stewards have done? Maybe, and this is pure speculation, but maybe the stewards felt that it was the team in the wrong for that part and it would be unfair to punish the driver too much. I'm not sure on that though, because it's a team sport at the end of the day, and although it is up to the team to ask the driver to pit, they can see the damage better than the driver ultimately. A fine just doesn't feel anywhere near enough for that incident, and so there had to be another penalty somewhere. I'm just trying to think of an alternative penalty, perhaps losing the constructors' points for that race, or just the points Leclerc picked up. That could have perhaps, maybe, whatever, worked. But again, it's a team sport, and the driver gets a penalty when there is an unsafe release, and the team loses points when a driver crashes out. I don't know, 10 seconds does seem very lenient given the whole what could have happened argument and the safety argument on the whole, but aside from throwing Leclerc out of the race, I'm not really sure what the stewards could have done. I'm not going to ramble here about possibilities and all that, but let me know what you think in the comments, because I would honestly be interested to know if you think that penalty was too much, not enough, or just about right. Like I say, there's definitely a fair bit of debate over it all. So, a lot to talk about around Ferrari, but despite the fact that I've already been talking about them for what feels like 6 hours, that wasn't all for Ferrari. At the very start of the race, Sebastian Vettel moved before the lights went out, stopped, and then went when the lights eventually did go out. And that's one of the biggest reasons as to why he had such a poor start and was jumped by Bottas. I said in the watch along that was a slam dunk penalty, as things like jump starts and pit lane speeding are generally a matter of fact. How wrong I was on that. It was investigated, but despite moving before the lights went out, the stewards did not hand out a penalty. Confused? I was. It has all now been explained though. Basically, it was all within the tolerances allowed by the regulations. What those tolerances are, nobody outside of the FIA knows, and rightly so, by the way, because if the teams knew, they could exploit that and try to gain an advantage. So I wouldn't expect any clarity on this anytime soon. Michael Massey, the race director, did say, though, that although he is happy with the current system, they may look at a new system to measure jump starts in future, as the technology currently used has been in place for a long time. To be honest, I don't really know what to say. On board, the Ferrari moves before the lights go out, so in theory, it's a jump start. But if it hasn't triggered the sensor or whatever it is that keeps it within those so-called tolerances, then I guess by the letter of the FIA rules, it's not a penalty. But without ending up on some massive rant about it all, should we have tolerances when it comes to jump starts? Surely if a car moves before the lights go out, it's a jump start. Matter of fact, black and white, whatever you want to say. It just seems weird to me, and I know I'm not alone on this, that there is this grey area around something like a jump start. It's a bit of a weird one for me to try and get my head around because, like I've already said, I always thought that a jump start equaled a penalty, but clearly not. There are these tolerances in this grey area that we are never going to know about. I will say though, I think the whole thing's been blown massively out of proportion. It's not like he jumped the start, disappeared by 10 seconds before anybody else even moved and then won the race comfortably. He really did lose out. I'm not saying that if a driver loses out with a jump start they shouldn't be punished, but I don't think it warrants the kick-off that it's got. I'm going to move on though, otherwise this video will just end up being the Japanese Grand Prix Ferrari debrief. That's what it feels like anyway at the moment. The Scuderia though were not the only ones to face post-race investigations or drama. As already covered, Pierre Gasly and Sergio Perez were investigated and let off for their collision, but there was something handed to the stewards that could potentially have a huge impact on this year's championship. Racing Point launched a protest against Renault after the race for an alleged breach of the sporting regulations specifically for, I'm going to try my best with this one, preset lap distance dependent brake bias adjustment system. Yeah. That protest will be looked at, and as a result, the FIA have sealed and impounded the ECUs, the electronic control units and steering wheel of both the Renault cars. It is reported that Racing Point presented a 12-page dossier to the FIA, which says to me that they've been working on this for a while. This isn't just something from Japan. Look, as many of you will know, I've never, ever claimed to be any kind of expert when it comes to the technical stuff around F1. I'm just a gobby passionate fan. So I've had a look around, and the easiest way to explain this is by saying that Renault have allegedly, there's going to be a lot of ifs and buts in this one, but allegedly been programming the car to automatically change the brake bias so that it is set up perfectly for each and every corner. It is all apparently done based on distance travelled, with Craig Scarborough saying that it's the distance from the start line that has been used as a signal to adjust the bias per turn. And all of that, simple as, is illegal. No system is allowed on any car that automatically adjusts the brake bias. Long story short, Renault could be in a lot of trouble. I wouldn't expect a quick decision on this one if I were you. They will need to investigate it and talk to teams and personnel involved, and that's going to take a bit of time. It is definitely worth keeping an eye on though, because it could all have huge ramifications. If Renault are found to have broken any rules, then I feel as though it will probably come down to just how long it's been going on. So, for example, and this is pure speculation by the way, I don't know what the decision's going to be, and there's not really too much of a precedent in recent Formula 1 history for this, but if it is found that that system was in place for just Japan, I would guess that they will be thrown out of the final result. However, if it's been going on for multiple races, Renault could find themselves thrown out of the Constructors and possibly the Drivers' Championship altogether. The reason I say that is because although technology is very good these days, and you would imagine that all the data and information will be in these electronic control units, I'm not really sure how specific the FIA can go. So what I mean is, how can they be 100% certain what races that system has been used and has not been used at? So if there is any doubt as to how long that's been used, I think the FIA will have to come down very hard on Renault. Watch this space though, but what it means immediately is that for now, the Japanese Grand Prix result is still provisional. Just to summarise my thoughts on the Japanese Grand Prix as a whole though, I actually quite enjoyed the race, but then I do like that strategical side to Formula 1. There wasn't a huge amount of wheel-to-wheel action at the front, but it did definitely stay tense. What kept the race going though was that battle in the midfield, specifically between the two Renaults, the two Racing Points and a couple of Toro Rossos as well. We saw some really good overtaking there, some aggressive driving as well, and that's what we really want to see as fans. Alright, I will admit that the stewards were a little bit all over the place on Sunday, but I do feel, and I'm not defending them here, but I do feel like they're still currently trying to find the right balance between what is hard racing and what is too far over the line. So I think we are going to see a few more inconsistent weekends between now and the end of the season, but they're going to have to get a hold of that quickly because we need to know, and the drivers need to know, and the teams need to know what they can get away with on track. I hope you get what I'm trying to say there. But yeah, it was a good race. It wasn't up there with the levels of Austria, for example, or Germany, which was just absolute madness. But it was still, for me at least, thoroughly enjoyable and definitely a step up from Russia, which itself wasn't awful, but I'd certainly rather watch the Japanese Grand Prix over the Russian Grand Prix again. And I do just want to finish off by saying massive credit as well to everybody at Suzuka Circuit for somehow managing to put 2 days worth of work into just a few hours to get everything ready so that we could go racing. And I've got to say as well, I loved having qualifying and the race on the same day. So if they want to shake things up for 2021, let's have practice on a Saturday, qualifying Sunday morning and the race on Sunday afternoon. That is it then for the Japanese Grand Prix debrief. Like I say, a little bit different this time around, but that is because I knew that going over the Renault thing and the Ferrari incidents was going to dominate this video and take a while to get through. There is, as usual, a poll behind the eye at the top right of the screen where you can rate the race, and you can also let me know your thoughts on the weekend as a whole down in the comment section. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can of course follow me over on social media, and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.